Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Skye and today I am starting a new series on my channel. This is episode 1 of my indie brand showcase. Basically in this series I will be reviewing a bunch of different products from one specific brand in general and basically giving you guys a brand review, what I recommend, the prices, swatches, all of that good stuff. And I thought the brand that would make the most sense for me to do the first episode of in this series is Odens Eye. Odens Eye are a Swedish indie brand based in Stockholm, and their brand aesthetic and what they are inspired by is Norse mythology, which sings to my heart so much. It's very ethereal, very fairy-like, and that is me in a brand. If I ever came out with a brand, it would be Odens Eye. So safe to say I'm a massive fan of them. This video isn't sponsored in any way. I purchased all these products myself. Some were gifts from family members, but they were not gifted to me by the brand. The only things that I haven't tried from the brand are the Solmane highlighter palette, the Freya palette, and the matte blushes, and also the new Norns collection. But aside from that, I have tried everything from the brand, so I figured this would still be a useful video. But anyways, this is going to be a really long video I feel like, so let's get started. And we're first going to start off with the eyeshadow palettes, and we're going to go in chronological order from the first one released. So the first palette we're going to be talking about is the Solmane palette. I believe this was the second palette that Odens Eye ever released, and Solmane in Swedish means sun moon. I'm probably going to be pronouncing the name wrong, I am not Swedish. The packaging is very beautiful, stunning artwork, and this is tactile. There's a lot of different textures going on here and it's just stunning. And I mean, look at that holographic. It's stunning. And this is what the palette looks like on the inside. It's a 12-pan palette that has kind of a warm neutral color story. And this palette along with the Freya palette are the only palettes where the names of the shadows aren't listed on the actual palette. They are listed on the back, but not underneath the shadows. However, with the more recent Odens Eye releases, the names of the shadows are on the inside of the palette, which I do appreciate because I like to see the shadow names, and it's a lot easier to figure it out rather than looking at the back constantly. This palette retails for £23, and the way that this palette is laid out, we have a column of matte, a column of shimmers, matte, shimmers. So it's an even split of 6 mattes and 6 shimmers. Let's talk about the matte formula first. These mattes are very soft in the pan. They are slightly powdery and you do get a kick up in the pan. You don't get much fallout on your face, but you can if you apply a little bit too much. I personally do not care about fallout because I normally do my eye makeup first. These shadows are very pigmented. You can pick them up on a brush very easily, and these do blend beautifully. There's no patchiness, nothing like that. These don't fade on me throughout the day, and I do have oily eyelids. I personally use the Milani eyeshadow primer, and that works fantastically with their matte formula. And I'd say that Odens Eye's matte formula is pretty consistent over the palettes. However, there is one palette that I'm going to mention that I feel like the matte formula is a bit off. I personally really love Odens Eye's matte formula, especially this lavender in this palette. This is a fantastic lavender, and I have it on the outer part of my lash line today. It is so pigmented, not patchy at all, and purples are very hard to formulate, so I'm very impressed with this purple. It's probably one of my favourite matte purples in my collection. And I really like the pop of rosiness in the palette. It really brings something different. I will say the only thing that I don't like about this palette in terms of the matte formula is that we have a beige matte. I don't like beige mattes personally. It's very limiting in a palette because beiges can only work for so many skin tones. It's just, I personally prefer if they just left it out, because then more people would be able to use more shades in the palette. Also, this dark chocolate brown is fantastic, super deep, really rich, love it. Now I'm going to show you guys this palette up close because there's a lot of different shimmer formulas in here. I find that there are 3 different shimmer formulas. We have super high shine glittery, standard metallics, and toppers. So for me, I find that this shade down here is a high shine metallic. As we can see in the pan, it is so stunning. This is one of my favorite shades in the palette. This shade, and this shade are the standard metallic formula. This shade and this shade are more toppers. They have a sheerer base and you can use them both on the inner corner or layered up on top of other shades. I personally love this high shine metallic and this inner corner eye topper type thing. Those two are my favorites in the palette. I do love the metallics as well, the standard metallics. They are very creamy. They work well with both a brush and a finger, and they do look very pretty. It's just I personally prefer something really wham bam in your face sparkly. The only shade that I genuinely don't like in this palette is this shade right here. This is like a navy grey with some blue and fun sparkle in it. However, this gets hard pan very quickly, and It's... Where is it? I find when shadows do this, I do have to kind of like scrape into them to make them work, but this kind of eyeshadow isn't really my favorite anyways, so I don't really see the need for me to work with it. But just to let you know that that shade can get hard pan and it's not very pigmented, even though it's more of an eye topper. I prefer if darker shades like this had more of a base colour to them because it's just a personal preference thing. Overall, for £23, I really like this palette. It is a stunning neutral palette with a pop of purple and that fun duochrome in here. It is very pretty and I really do like it. I do have a 3 looks 1 palette plus review going up with this palette soon. Not too sure when, I am currently working on it. Now the next palette release from them is the Alva Palette. This is a rosy neutral colour story with a pop of yellow. This is a 16 pan palette and it retails for £24. I have a lot to say about this one. As we can see, there is a limited amount of mattes in here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mattes and the rest are metallics. I personally prefer more mattes than metallics in my palettes. Like, give me either a 50-50 split or like 70% mattes and the other percentage metallics. I can't do math, I have dyscalculia, I can't do it. So that is already something that I'm not a big fan of in this palette. Also, there's another beige matte in here which I could do without. And the matte shadows in here, they are all rosy neutrals except for this one. However, even though this shade and this shade, for an example, look like they have a lot of depth to them, not really on the eyes. And even though I leave my base tacky, these ones, no matter how much you build them up, they don't get any darker. They are very like mid-toned, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like I just need a bit of depth to a neutral palette. I also find that these mattes do have a bit of a struggle layering on top of each other, which is quite strange because I don't find that with any other Odens Eye mattes that I've tried. The yellow is a really nice yellow, however, you do have to build it up quite a bit. Now this palette has a lot of the metallics, which is the main standout of the palette. As you can see when I move the palette in the light, most of them are very high shine. I love this shade Lilac right here. It's more of like a topper shade, but there's a mix of like super high shine metallics and topper shades, which you would have seen in the swatches. I love this palette for the metallics especially. They are very beautiful, very foiled, and you can work with them either with your finger, a wet brush, or even with some glitter glue underneath. I find that Odens Eye's metallics in general work better with a wet brush if you want them to be more intense. That being said, I do like this palette, it's very pretty. However, this is my second least favourite out of all the palettes that they offer. It's nice and £24 is still a decent price. However, it's just not my makeup preference totally. I feel like this palette is more work appropriate than anything, which, you know, sometimes you need a palette like that. And actually, I'm gonna rate everything out of 10. I forgot to do that. I think I'll rate this a 6 out of 10 because I really do love the metallics, but this palette is more so a palette that I would reach into as a companion palette to others. I would reach for this one over the Alva palette because I like the tones a bit better and the metallics are more fun to work with and the mattes are really fantastic too. Except for this shade, I would give this palette a solid 7.5 out of 10. Now we're moving on to my favorite palette that Odens Eye sells, and this is the Alva II palette. This also has my favorite packaging of the bunch. As you can see, the design is absolutely stunning, and it is shiny as well. This is another 16 pan palette and it retails for £26. And in here there's a mix of mattes, shimmers, high shine metallics, and 2 pressed glitters. Now, if you aren't new to my channel, then you will know that this is actually one of my favorite palettes in my collection. I actually ranked this as my #1 palette of 2020. Let's talk about the matte formula first. The mattes are very creamy and very pigmented, very similar to the Solmane Palette mattes. They blend effortlessly, you don't have to work super hard with them in order to get a nice look, and even though there's a lot of pastel tones in here, like this shade Aquamarine and Green Tea, and even Blue Peafowl, even though those are more pastel tones, they are still very impactful on the eyes. And especially this shade Green Tea is just one of my favorite greens in my collection. This tone of green especially is just stunning. I really love the matte formula in here. It is absolutely top notch, especially with this color story. This color story is me. I really resonate with this color story. It's so much fun. You can do so many different looks. You can even do a little bit of a neutral look if you'd like to. Like maybe mix this shade with these two. I've done that in my 3 looks 1 palette with this palette. and the look came out really pretty. Now let's talk about the metallics in this palette. We have high shine metallics, which are Crystal, Green Elves, and Deep Sea, and Copper Red. Those are the beautiful high shine metallic formula that just looks wet on your eyes, and they are very comparable to Kaleidos metallics. They have a strong base color to them and shine a lot. I'm actually wearing Green Elves on the inner portion of my lid, and it's just so high shine and beautiful. I'm actually wearing a full face of Odin's Eye right now. And I've used a mix of this palette, the Solmane Palette, and one of the mini palettes, the Mini Forest. But these high shine metallics are very soft in the pan. There's no fallout on your face, and they do work best with either a wet brush or a glitter glue underneath, or your finger. Now let's talk about the standard metallics in the palette, which are Blue Bubble, Sapphire, and Forest Dream. Like I mentioned with the Solmane palette, these are just standard metallics. They're not super intense, but they're more intense than a satin. But like I've mentioned, for me personally and my personal preference, I prefer more high shine metallics, but they do work really beautifully. And finally, we'll talk about the one reason, my one critique of this palette, and those are the pressed glitters. Now, this is the only palette that I own that has pressed glitters in it. I tend to avoid palettes with pressed glitter, but with this palette I just could not say no because I loved the colour story too much. And I'm going to be honest, I have never used them on my eyes because pressed glitter, if you don't know, it's not eye safe. Cosmetic grade glitter is just not safe to use because it is plastic. Like if they replace these two shades with a high shine metallic formula but like in the same colour, this palette would be a solid 10 out of 10 from me. But because of the pressed glitters, I've never used them on my eyes and I tend to avoid them. I literally have only touched those pressed glitters to swatch them, and I've swatched them twice. Once when I first got the palette and once again for this video. But with all that said and done, this is one of my favourite palettes in my collection, and I highly, highly recommend it aside from the pressed glitters. So if you can look past the pressed glitters, this palette is a 9 out of 10 from me. Now finally, we're moving on to the last eyeshadow palettes I have from Odens Eye, and these are the mini palettes. These came out with the Alva II collection that came out last summer. They do have 3 other mini palettes in their Norns collection. Now last week I did do a 3 looks 3 palettes plus review with these mini palettes from Odens Eye, so if you want to see my full in-depth thoughts, then please watch that video because I feel like I don't want to talk about them too much in this one because we got a lot to get through. But let's start off with my favourite one. This is a Mini Forest and it looks like this on the inside. These are 6 pan palettes, the middle is a split pan, but the split pan has the same formula in each 2 shades. These are high shine metallics. There's 2 mattes, 1 standard metallic, and another high shine. I am wearing the shades Mint and Shine today. I love this palette so much because it does have the matte formula and the high shine metallic formula. There is 1 regular metallic. If I could change one thing about this palette, this shade would be a matte for me. The mattes blend absolutely beautifully. The high shine metallics are so like shiny on your lids. They are very consistent with the Solmane palette and the Alva II formula. All of these palettes are. The mini palettes retail for £16 and I highly, highly, highly recommend this one. I feel like I would give this one an 8 out of 10, I'd say. The only thing that I would change about this palette is change this shade into a matte. So maybe I'd give it a 9 out of 10. 8 or 9 out of 10. The next palette is the Mini Ocean palette and it looks like this. So in here we have 1 true matte, 1 matte with glitter in it, 1 standard metallic, 1 satin, and 2 high shine metallics. Now in the video where I used all 3 of these palettes, I mentioned that I really fucking hate the shade Under the Sea. This is a satin shade and I personally hate satins. They are the bane of my existence in eyeshadows. They don't work as lid shades, they don't work in the crease. I just don't like it. Give me a standard matte or a metallic. Don't give me a mix. But whenever I tried to use this shade as a matte, it's very thick. It doesn't like to blend. It doesn't work with a brush. It doesn't work on a tacky base. It just does not work. The only way you can make it work is by applying it with your finger. That is the only way that I found to make it work. So I'd say that shade is a complete miss for me in the palette. This shade Starfish is a matte with glitter in it, and even though I prefer this over this shitty satin, mattes with glitter in them, what the fuck? Why? Literally why? The glitter sticks around even when you blend it into the crease, and I really hate that. It's just a pet peeve of mine. I don't like seeing specks of glitter in a matte. it pisses me off. This metallic is just fine. This matte performs like the rest of the mattes that Odens Eye has, and the two high shine shades are really beautiful. I love these shades. Realistically, I would only really reach for this palette for this shade and the high shine metallics, so I'd give this a 5 out of 10 because I'd only use 50% of the palette. And finally, the last eyeshadow palette I'm going to be talking about is the mini Skye palette. This one has 2 mattes with glitter in them, 3 high shine metallics, and 1 standard metallic. Now, like I mentioned, I don't like mattes with glitter in them. However, I would much rather have a matte with glitter in them rather than a shitty satin shade. Or just a satin shade in general. It's more user-friendly for me, and just in general, I just think you can make them work as mattes. Even though the glitter does stick around, you can make them work. These high shine metallics, like I've mentioned with all the other Odens Eye palettes, my favourite formula. My favourite formula of metallics, so beautiful. They pick up very well with a brush, they're very creamy and very pigmented. I do highly recommend. And the shade Purple Light, even though it's a standard metallic, which isn't always my personal preference, it's still a really nice metallic. So I would give this palette a 7 out of 10. Yeah, 7 out of 10. We're going to talk about their highlighter formula. Now, I have the Alva II highlighter palette, and again, the packaging is very stunning. This is actually the exact same size as the Solmane palette, and this comes with 4 highlighter shades. Now, I found that there are different formulas in here. These 3 shades are more of a sheen on your cheeks. They're not glittery at all. They provide a really beautiful glow to your cheeks. They're not super high shine, but they are beautiful highlighters. Especially this shade Gnome. I feel like you could make this work for like an everyday makeup look, because it's kind of like a nice peachy tone. This blue shade kind of shows up more silver on my cheeks. It doesn't really look as blue as it does on the cheeks, at least on my skin tone. This shade Sylphs is absolutely stunning. It's very smooth and almost looks like a UV light on your cheeks. If you put that shade on top of like a peachy blush, I've done that combo so many times. I've worn a peachy blush and then put this as my highlighter. It just makes your cheeks look like you're like glowing, because it does have a peachy pink sheen to it. It just looks divine on the skin. Now, my favorite shade in this palette is this one, Salamander. Now, I'm not too sure if I can show it on camera, but this one is very textured. This doesn't have much of a base color to it, but it is very, very, very sparkly. I'm actually wearing a combination of Salamander and Gnome on my cheeks. I put Gnome down as my base shade, and then I topped it with Salamander. It is the perfect highlighter topper, or you can just use it as a standalone highlighter. Salamander is very on par with the Kaleidos highlighters, like the sparkly formula such as Skywalker and Diamond Dasher. I really like this highlighter palette. It is really nice. This also retails for £24. And also, I almost forgot to mention that the shade Sylphs, this butterfly right here, is purely just a glitter overspray. So I've never touched it because it just looks really cute. So I do highly recommend this palette. If you're a fair to light skin tone, I feel like you could make these shades work. Maybe if you're a medium skin tone, you could make it work, but I feel like this is more of like a pale to light palette. I really do hope that Odens Eye comes out with more shades that are more friendly for deeper complexions, because this formula is really nice. I really do like it a lot. I think out of 10, I would rate the highlighter palette probably a 7 out of 10. Next up, we're moving on to the blush formula. This is the Flower Blush formula. They're glowy blushes. I only have one shade, and this is the shade Little Jasmine. It's a really beautiful, warm, peachy terracotta shade. I'm not too sure how to describe this shade. It's kind of rosy, kind of terracotta-y, and it does have a gold sheen in it. It's more of a satin blush. It's not super glowy. I am wearing it on my cheeks today, and these blushes are pigmented. Like, you gotta dip in with your brush fairly, like, gently, because the type of person that I am, I'm very rough with my makeup application, I'm gonna be honest. But with this blush, it's so pigmented that you need to be kind of careful. It wears really nicely on my cheeks, and I have oily skin. All I'm wearing today as my base makeup is primer, concealer, and powder. That's usually my base routine. I don't tend to reach for foundation, but this still lasts on my skin beautifully. It doesn't wear away, and it still looks as intense at the end of the day as it did in the beginning. And I really feel like because the blush formula is very pigmented, this could work for a lot of different skin tones, and they only have 3 shades of their Flower Blush, 3 of their fruit blush. The fruit blushes are the matte blushes. Even though there's only 3 shades, I feel like they could work for a lot of different skin tones, but at least for me, I really enjoy this a lot. I love the tone of it, I love the formula, so I'd say I would give this a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. I really do like it. Now we're moving on into the home stretch. We're gonna talk about the lip products from Odens Eye. Now I don't know if we can tell, but I like things in twos quite a lot. So let's first talk about their newest lip release, and those are their bullet lipsticks. I have one in the cream formula and one in the velvet formula. Let's talk about the velvet formula first because I'm actually wearing this shade on my lips today. This packaging is really beautiful. There's a little fairy on the tube right here, and it says Odens Eye right there. The packaging is top notch, just like everything else Odens Eye has. Now they call this a velvet formula, which is essentially a fancy way of saying a matte bullet lipstick. There's only 3 shades of the velvet and 3 of the cream, but this shade that I have right here, light peach, I have it on my lips today. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous formula and a really beautiful color. The formula, when you put it on your lips, it's not too creamy, but not too, like, tough either. It's a very nice in-between. Velvet is a really good way to describe it, because sometimes I find with super matte bullet lipsticks, they tug at your lips and they just... It's not a pleasant experience, but this one, it's creamy enough to make sure that it glides on your lips nicely, but not too creamy that it moves around on your face throughout the day. That's one thing I struggle with matte bullet lipsticks, is the fact that they are not really matte either, because every time I've tried a matte bullet lipstick, it doesn't look matte, it still has a shine to it, but this one, I mean, you can see it's a solid matte. I think alongside the color and the formula, this is one of my favorite lipsticks in my collection, and I don't say that lightly. I love how it looks, the formula is fantastic. It will wear off with eating and drinking, but that's kind of to be expected of bullet lipsticks, but this lasts pretty well. Like, if you're drinking a coffee, this will stay on your lips still. I would give this a 9 out of 10. It would be a solid 10 out of 10 if they had more shades, because they only have 3, but I really hope they do expand, because this shade, light peach, this is just perfect for me. Okay, so the lighting is a little bit different. My camera battery died, so I had to charge it, and I really don't want to put on my studio light because my eyes are getting pretty irritated right now. If I sit in front of that for too long, it just starts to hurt my eyes. But I hope this lighting isn't too bad, I do apologize, but let's finish off talking about the lipsticks. So I forgot to mention that the cream and the velvet, they both retail for £13, which in my opinion is a fantastic price for a bullet lipstick. I have a bit of a blocked nose right now, but these smell very slightly like the liquid lipsticks and the glosses that they have, but not as strong, so it's that kind of sweet candy smell. To me, these smell like Kiki Bonbon, which I'll put a picture right here if you don't know, if you're not Balkan. They're basically Starbursts. They smell like Starbursts to me. Now let's talk about the cream formula. Now I really do appreciate that the matte and the cream, they both have the same component, however the cream one is slightly more pink toned and this one is more neutral. So I have the cream lipstick in the shade Love Jasmine, and like I said, this is a cream lipstick, and this feels very smooth, like very creamy, very moisturizing. They kind of feel a bit like a lip balm in a way. This color is very pigmented and really creamy, very hydrating on the lips. This one doesn't last as long as the velvet lipstick. I find with the velvet lipstick, it lasts better throughout the day because it stays put. This one is more movable. Is malleable a good word to describe a lipstick? Because this does move around and it will wear off quicker. This color is absolutely stunning. It's a very similar color to the Little Jasmine cream lip stain, which I'll talk about in a moment. So obviously I had to get the Love Jasmine color because that's my favorite tone of lipstick, and I love this formula. It's fantastic. Again, my only real critique about this lipstick is the fact that there's only 3 shades, but also this formula doesn't last super long on the lips. It lasts a decent amount of time, but if you're like talking a lot, drinking, eating, it will wear away, but that's kind of the nature of these cream bullet lipsticks. I personally love both of these for different reasons because they're 2 very different formulas, but I feel like, I don't know which one's my favorite. You can't make me pick. Don't make me pick. Now finally we're gonna move on to the liquid lipsticks. Let's start off with the matte ones first. Now these are called a matte lip stain. However, I find that they don't stain my lips at all, so if you were worried about that, don't worry, these don't actually stain. At least on my lips personally, I don't find that they leave any sort of like colour behind. I have the shades Perfect Plum and Apricot Girl. Perfect Plum is my favourite of the two because it's such a beautiful plum colour. And also the applicator of these is like a slanted, flat, pointed doe foot. It picks up a nice amount of product, and because it's pointed at the end, you can really define your lip shape, which I really like. But I find that these last on me very well throughout the day. I will say that if you do eat oily food, they will come off, but that's kind of the nature of matte liquid lipsticks. But these last through eating, drinking really, really well, and they don't feel super dry on the lips either. You can also blot these on really nicely if you just want like a blotted lip effect, and that will kind of prevent them from being more drying. But for me, I don't notice these to be super drying. They don't flake off my lips. They look beautiful all throughout the day. I will say by the end of the day, they do slightly wear off on the center of my lips, but most liquid lipsticks do, for me at least. And these retail for £12. Now for that price and the shade selection, again, highly, highly, highly recommend these. They also dry down to kind of like that powdery finish where when you like purse your lips together, you don't feel them at all, which is my favorite type of liquid lipstick formula. I'd say out of 10, these would be a 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Probably 9 out of 10. Now we're moving on to another favourite from Odens Eye. These are the cream lip stains. Now again, they're called lip stains, they don't stain your lips. And these are more like really pigmented glosses. I'd say the formula is very comparable to the Fenty Beauty Gloss Bombs. They're kind of that thicker formula on the lips. Not thick as in the sense where like when you talk there's like the weird stringy thing going on, which is really fucking gross. They're a thicker gloss, but they're not super sticky on the lips. They're very balmy feeling and incredibly hydrating. These are so freaking hydrating. You can almost use these like a lip balm, and because they're glosses, they're super glossy on the lips. They also have that Kiki Bonbon scent, which is absolutely delicious. The scent does go away, however, once you finish applying the lipstick, so if you don't like lipsticks that have a taste to them, these don't have a taste to them, only when you're like initially applying them. Obviously my favorite shade ever is Little Jasmine. This shit is so good. It's my favorite neutral lipstick in my collection. Well, neutral gloss. The cream lip stains also 10 out of 10 from me. Just off the board, 10 out of 10. As much as I love everything from the brand, I mean, like you saw with my ratings, I clearly love the brand a lot. I have to say that their lipsticks are the best thing that they make. If you're contemplating making an Odens Eye order, please like consider the lip products. I mean, this year is not really the year of lip products, let's be honest, with masks and everything. If you're ever in the market for some lipsticks, Odens Eye is the best place to go. So yeah, with all of that said and done, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know this video is quite a long one, but I wanted to be as in depth with everything as possible. I hope you guys appreciate and like the first episode of Indie Brand Showcase here on my channel. Do let me know what other brands you'd like to see me review in this kind of video format. I'm thinking of doing Lethal Cosmetics next because I fucking love Lethal. Full details of this makeup look are not going to be on Instagram because I, quite frankly, forgot to take pictures. But it's Beauty by Skye right here. Do follow me on there if you want to see more makeup content from me. And you can also follow me on my other social media. I run a makeup community Discord. The link to join will be down below. And my Twitter are both linked down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to have you here. We talk a lot about indie makeup, do a lot of looks, and all that good stuff. And as always, stay safe, wash your hands, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.